Hey, I wanted to talk real quick about the police.
Okay.
So this whole thing down in Texas, the first thing I thought about was Philando Castile and how his murder was an act of cowardice. He basically rotated his upper body to the right and was immediately murdered. And not only was he murdered, but the entire police world thought that it was
Justified.
correct.
Right.
Like, I was actually with a cop when the video was, because his girlfriend did like a Facebook Live as he was dying. And this police officer, who is otherwise in his family life and I think he's not corrupt in other ways, but the standard that he articulated to me was anytime a cop uses force, it's justified because they're the only one who knows the stress of the situation. They're the only one who can really understand that situation. And it's totally inappropriate to question their judgment in that moment, which is like an absurd standard. But this is the standard that is broadly embraced by even the people that we consider in our lives to be the good cops.
Well, and let's be clear, that's not a standard. Like, I mean, by any definition of the word standard, it's not a standard. If it is all up to the determination of the cop in the moment, there is no standard. There is no standard. Sorry,
I just have something in my throat.
That's not by definition a standard. A standard is something that can be applied from person to person. If the cop's standard, in quotes, is whatever the cop thinks is appropriate, that's not a standard, like definitionally speaking. And I agree with you. I think that it is. And I also think, and this is not in any way, I mean, people hear this all the time, but they are trained to feel like they are dealing with the enemy at all times. And they are trained that the enemy is dangerous at all times. And so they are going into these situations. Half of what is needed to get to the place where they get to when they shoot somebody or don't shoot is already achieved before they even walk up to into the situation, because they're so primed. I mean, I remember talking to a cop before the 2004 Republican convention in New York City, and they were convinced that there was going to be like protesters with Molotov cocktails. And I mean, he was telling me like they were getting daily reports on this stuff. And it was crazy. It was crazy.
I mean, the paranoid ideation of law enforcement, I mean, Brett Weinstein was talking to a DHS guy about race war. That's when he tried to fire me. Like, that stuff, I remember like a This American Life podcast or some podcast like that did a story about, it was focusing on how so many cops that police inner city areas are from the suburbs. And like, not only that, like, they're going and policing those places at night. They literally don't know those places in the daylight. And yeah, like they're scared suburbanites.
You forget, like, like what your feeling was before you moved to New York City. There is a fear. I mean, and frankly, I mean, I know this at least, 25 years ago when I was in Cuba, Castro would bring people from the rural areas into the city to be cops because of that sort of like prejudice, predisposition, paranoia that already exists. I mean, you bring people down to New York for the first time and they're going to be afraid. And you talk to those people after a year of living here and they're going to be like, oh yeah, no.
Right.
I look back on that time and I think that was silly. And that's just the dynamic. I mean, the reverse is also true. I know people who come from the city and they go upstate for a weekend. They hear one gunshot and they're barricaded under their bed. I mean, there's a certain inevitability that, people are going to be nervous in situations where they don't spend all of their time or the most of their time because they don't understand the cues the social cues that they're around.
Yeah, and there's a conditioning, particularly in this country, that codes cities and crime in cities as like completely unencumbered, scary. It's the local newsification of the cops and their mentality.
He already left.
Oh, he left. Oh, I was waiting for Raygun.
Raygun left because
Okay.
probably it's the client sitting in his office was probably like, "Why are you still on the phone? Like, what are you?"
One more moment.
This is. I just got one more. I got one more point to make about Gary Busey. Can you just